Welcome back to Rockford Reading Daily. We are continuing to read Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City by Matthew Desmond. We are on chapter 21, which is entitled Big Head Boy. I want to encourage people to please share this from whatever platform you're listening to it on. We put these episodes out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Anchor, YouTube, Facebook, SoundCloud. So please share this from wherever you're listening to it at. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes of Rockford Reading Daily if you have not yet done so. And I want to encourage you to listen to future episodes if by the time you get a hold of this, there are more episodes out. We are just about finished with Evicted by Matthew Desmond. And up to this point, we have got a very, very descriptive, very detailed description of the experiences of people living on the margins of housing, of people who are living in the depths of poverty. We have followed some Black people through their experiences, predominantly Black women through their experiences. We followed white people through their experiences, predominantly white women through their experiences. And we've seen the commonalities that these experiences have, and we've also seen the differences that these experiences have had. And throughout this book, Matthew Desmond has done a good job of giving us historical facts about housing and the issues of housing, and whether that be things that are as recent as the 2008 housing crash, or things that go back as far as of England in the 1400s, which is something that we sort of read about in the last episode. And we are taking a microscopic look at people's experiences in Milwaukee. But one of the things I've commonly said about any book that we've read is that even though we may be looking at an isolated experience, it's important to remember that these issues play themselves out every single day in all types of different ways throughout this country. And the first step to being able to understand the complexities of some of these issues when they happen to so many different people is understanding what it looks like when it happens to just one person, and then sort of learning different intricacies as you go along. And so that is what we have been doing with Evicted by Matthew Desmond. So let's continue reading and pick up on chapter 21, entitled Big Head Boy. Sharina had Lamar and Kamala's torch building bulldozed. She used the insurance money to buy 2 new duplexes, doubling the units she had lost to the fire. When the Hinkstons looked out their back window, all they saw was a vacant lot. The only remaining visible reminder of that night was a makeshift memorial Kamala and her family set up. Stuffed animals and photographs tied to a tree with a cotton sash cord. The most prominent photograph showed the baby in an Easter dress, her calm eyes large in her small face. For the animals, they had selected rabbits, bears, a goose, a raccoon, and a hippopotamus. Candles in glass vases and Coke cans circled the base of the tree. Natasha was sorting through a garbage bag of baby clothes a friend had picked up at a church pantry. She moved her hands tenderly and smiled at each miniature item. The idea of becoming a mother was growing on her. Quote, "I want my baby to have my looks," end quote, Natasha said. Quote, "I don't want my baby looking like Malik. He got some big old buck eyes," end quote. Quote, "You so mean," end quote, Doreen said. Quote, "He all black," end quote. Overhearing, Patrice came into the dining room wearing her cousin Sub's uniform. Quote, "Your baby gonna come out looking like a whole lot of folks," end quote, she teased. Quote, "No," end quote, Natasha laughed. Patrice sighed and changed the subject. Quote, "We got to do something about this toilet, fam," end quote. The toilet was stopped up again. So was the kitchen sink, brimming with gray water lined with the rust orange film. Periodically, someone would bucket it out. This made washing difficult, and dirty pots and plates began accumulating on the counter. So did more roaches and other bugs. Doreen didn't call Sharina about the plumbing. She didn't want to lecture and figured she wouldn't help anyway, since they were still behind. She didn't call a plumber either. Even if she could come up with the money, that would feel too much like helping Sharina, and nobody was interested in doing that. especially after the courthouse letter Patrice had received a few days back. It says she owed $2,494.50, the result of her second and third causes hearing. Quote, I live in that house for 4 months, end quote, Patrice has said. Quote, she said I owe her $24,000, end quote. Quote, that means you didn't pay rent at all, end quote, Doreen said. Quote, nah, now you just making up stuff, end quote. Patrice stared at the bill. She thought she owed more like $900. Quote, what are you going to do? End quote. Quote, I don't know what I can do, end quote. The Hinkstons expected more of their landlord for the money they were paying her. Rent was their biggest expense by far, and they wanted a decent and functional home in return. They wanted things to be fixed when they broke, but if Sharina wasn't going to repair her own property, neither were they. The house failed the tenants, and the tenants failed the house. The worse the Hinkstons' house got, the more everyone seemed to become withdrawn and lethargic, which only deepened the problem. Natasha started spending more time in Malik's. Doreen stopped cooking, and the children ate cereal for dinner. Patrice slept more. The children's grades dropped, and Mikey's teacher called saying he might have to repeat, mainly because of so many missed homework assignments. Everyone had stopped cleaning up, and trash spread over the kitchen floor. Substandard housing was a blow to your psychological health, not only because things like dampness, mold, and overcrowding could bring about depression, but also because of what living in awful conditions told you about yourself. It was once said that the poor are, quote, constantly exposed to evidence of their own irrelevance, end quote. Especially for poor African American families who live in neighborhoods with rates of violence and concentrated poverty so extreme that even the worst white neighborhoods bear little resemblance. Living in degrading housing in dangerous neighborhoods sent a clear message about where the wider society thought they belonged. Quote, honestly, this place is a shack, end quote, Doreen once said. Not long after that, Ruby came through the door and announced that, quote, a man just got killed right in front of the store, end quote. Growing up in a shack in the ghetto meant learning how to endure such an environment while also learning that some people never had to. People who were repulsed by their home, who felt they had no control over it, and yet had to give most of their income to it. They thought less of themselves. The older children found some reprieve from the apartment in the public library on Center Street. CJ, Ruby, and Mikey liked playing on the computer best. Ruby would begin her time there by checking in on, quote, her house, end quote, which she had gradually built up and improved through a free online game called Millsberry, a marketing tool created by General Mills. Her house was located on Bounty Drive in Golden Valley. It had clean, light-reflecting floors, a bed with sheets and pillowcases, and a desk for doing schoolwork. Doreen or Patrice could have walked to the library and searched for new housing on the internet, but they never did. This was partially because paying Sharina back meant they didn't have enough money to move, partially because, like most black renters, they didn't search for housing online, and partially because the family had sunk into a hazy depression. Patrice could feel the house sucking their energy. Quote, we just hit a mud hole with this house, end quote, she said. Quote, no one's trying to get better. Makes me not want to get better. If you're around people every day that doesn't want to do anything, eventually you will feel like doing nothing, end quote. Tennessee was sounding better to her day by day. When it was time, Malik rushed from the work to meet Natasha at the hospital. Weed and Francian, St. Joseph campus, on Chambers and 49th Street. She looked ready and scared. She clutched the bed railing with one hand and Malik's hand with the other. When Malik would try to stand up, back down, he would smile and rub her back. She focused on her breathing, just like they had practice in birthing class. Doreen watched knowingly from the rocking chair, arms folded over her stomach. The baby came at 11:10 p.m., weighing 8 pounds, 3 ounces. He was round-faced with a full shock of hair, pinkish-brown skin, and a broad Hinkston nose. As she lay sleeping the next morning, Natasha heard Patrice whisper, quote, hey, mama, end quote, in her ear. She smiled before opening her eyes. When the baby stirred, he was passed around, though Natasha had a hard time letting him go. All day long, She lifted him to her and kissed him softly on the nose and forehead. Patrice noticed Malik's proud face and decided then and there to name the baby Malik Jr. The next day, Natasha swaddled her tiny, cherished boy and took him back to the rat hole. And that is actually the end of chapter 21. It was a shorter chapter. And I think we're going to end this episode on that note. I think that might have been the happiest chapter in the entirety of this book. And so you see that even in the midst of all of this this negativity and all of this depression and all of this desperation, that there are still these moments of positivity which sort of remind you of the importance of family and the importance of love and the importance of finding a way to continue to carry on. And they named the baby Junior, even though the Hinkstons said that they don't do juniors. Okay, so let's end this episode here. And remember, we put these episodes out on a daily basis to provide people the opportunity to begin or further their journey in the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. And I will holler at you tomorrow.